Do you want to write with the elegance and complexity that David Foster Wallace does in his nonfiction? Today, I'll be going over Wallace's drafting process for his underrated nonfiction work. People rave about Infinite Jest and Wallace's fiction, but his nonfiction is astounding. And Wallace's drafting process for nonfiction is very similar to fiction. He is a 5-draft man. He first writes a rough draft by hand, revises it 2 times by hand, and then does 2 more revisions on a typewriter or a computer. However, these revisions aren't like the revisions you maybe made in a college class. These would take around 30 to 40 days each to complete with full focus. So you can just, first of all, imagine the complexity and work going into all of his pieces. Because to create a 5,000 word article, it ends up taking him 6 months. And this doesn't include what Wallace does, because he says, quote, "My process involves going to a place, talking to people, taking notes. I end up taking hundreds of times the amount of notes that I need." And this is the standard, everyone. This is what sets Wallace above the rest. Most people, when they write, they do it sloppily. They, first of all, have no experience in general. And then when they do step into something, they don't spend the time that's required to make it great. Wallace once said, "The only reason I'm better than anyone else and that you guys think I'm this great writer is that I've just had more time to sit with my work than other writers. I've been able to sit on some of my drafts full time for 7, 8 years." And Wallace was so obsessive and isolated that he really put the work in during that time. Other writers may take 6 or 7 years to finish a book, but they have families and they're doing all these other random projects. Wallace says of his first draft, quote, "My first draft usually approximates someone in the midst of an epileptic seizure. It's usually the second or the third draft where I usually find out what this thing is going to be about." And when you look at McCarthy's nonfiction, he always tethers it to something. Roger Federer as a religious experience. His essay on David Lynch, they take a very unique perspective. And what he's saying is that doesn't come at the start. He doesn't begin the process with that idea. He begins by assembling all the data and putting it together roughly, and then the core elements of the story come together. And once again, this is in opposition to what we do with most nonfiction essays. We think we need to have the main idea, find the thesis, state it, and that is so boring and so done. We need to write conscious. We need to write for audiences to fall in love with reading again, and that requires us to be experimental, to let the unconscious guide us to where we need to be. Wallace says you have to do it over and over again until you're crying and whining to your friends about it, and then you will finally reach the point where it's good. Once again, if you want to be on my bookshelf, if you want to be remembered and not have to work the job that you're working at right now and be a writer, you can try to take the fast route. You can try to take the genre fiction, fill the 2023 marketing bubble technique. But even if that works in terms of monetary success, your soul will be taken in the process. And it probably won't work. So the only way to guarantee that you can have success as a writer is to become so good that you are undeniable. People like to complain all the time about how they don't get noticed and their stuff doesn't get published. If you are good, you will get noticed and you will get published. Even with all the crap going on at publishing houses, eventually you will get good enough where people just cannot deny you. And then when your work gets spread out into the public, it will spread like wildfire if it's that good. But once again, most people are not that good. They have not even gotten close to putting in the 10,000 hours required to be a great writer. And Wallace knows this. He says, quote, "I think there are very few professional writers. Most writers out there have this talent. They worked on it for a while when they were younger and had time and are just kind of writing that with their audience for as long as they can go." We've seen so many people do this. Someone that Wallace and I both admire, Don DeLillo. He seemingly stopped trying at some point. Stephen King. I'm just looking at my shelf. T.C. Boyle, Louise Edrich. There should be a positive arc with your writing if you continue to try and be professional about it. But Wallace recommends not doing this. He says, quote, "I heartily advise people to not develop a process like that. I can't make a living writing one piece every 6 months." But once again, you're going to have to do this once or twice at least to get the credentials that you need. If you do this enough, eventually you will get noticed, get published somewhere good, maybe be able to receive a scholarship to get into a school or to get hired somewhere as a writer. Who knows? But readership is shrinking every single year. With AI coming and the amount of writers increasing every year, it's up to you to become undeniable. So if you guys want to see more David Foster Wallace content, I'm planning to create hundreds of videos on David Foster Wallace. I'd love to go on this journey with you guys, so subscribe to the channel, leave this video a like, comment your thoughts, comment your nonfiction writing process. I do something similar. I usually write 4 to 7 drafts, but in a dramatically shorter amount of time, 2 months tops. And I've never really done too much creative nonfiction, more academic stuff, but it's something I'd actually really like to explore. So I'm motivated to do this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.